everyone, this is Janet with Radiant Realty. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button and stay a while, and don't be shy. I love reading your comments and answering any questions that you have. So today is really special because I am here with Matt from Flathead Premier Title, and he has this amazing idea to share title horror stories with us, which just sounds like a blast. So I'm excited to share that with you, but before we get into that, Matt, can you just tell us a little bit about who you are, who Flathead Premier Title is, and just a little brief synopsis?
Sure. Well, I'm Matt Hall. I am the owner of Flathead Premier Title here. We service the Flathead Valley, and we opened in August of 2018, and I came up from Colorado. Spent quite a few years down there. I was 42 years in Colorado. Started my title career in 1996 in Colorado Springs. In 2004, I opened a company with some partners called Legacy Title Group in Colorado Springs. And my wife's originally from Libby, so that's what brought us up here. We had an opportunity to do Flathead Premier Title, and so here we are.
How do you like Montana?
Love Montana. My wife brought me up here probably 25 years ago, the first time. Fell in love with it. I told her somehow we're going to figure out a way to get back there and live. So it's been a great place.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so you said that you have a for sale by owner horror story that I am very curious about.
Yeah. So we always, when we deal with a for sale by owner, we always say, the first thing to say is you should really seek the advice of a realtor or an attorney, and because this is a huge investment that you're transferring, that you really should talk to an expert on that. But one case that we had is the people had two parcels of land right next door to each other. The assessor's office had just one assessor number assigned to both legal descriptions. When they wrote their contract, their buy-sell, they just copied off of the assessor's website the legal description that was on there. So we did the title commitment based off of what that buy-sell says, because we're acting as a scrivener to that contract. We included a map that showed both parcels on it. So everything was disclosed. We ended up closing not knowing that they really only intended to sell one parcel. Yeah, so they actually sold both pieces of land when they intended to sell just one. They didn't find out till probably about 6 months later.
How did they find out?
I believe it was when the tax bill came out. They didn't get a tax bill, and so they, luckily, the buyers that bought the property understood that they were just supposed to get one piece of land, and did do a quick claim deed back to the sellers for the parcel they were supposed to keep. It could have gotten very ugly. But that's, for us, that's why, using a realtor is so important, because you all have the expertise and to look for those kind of things and how to make sure that things like that don't happen.
Yes.
So that could have turned out a lot worse for the sellers. They could have been out quite a bit.
Well, fortunately, that horror story ended okay.
Yes.
But a good lesson for all of us.
It is.
So you have another one that you were talking about where you sat down to closing and then found out that there was a deceased owner?
Correct, yes. So in my former life, I would be handed just a closing package, not looked at the file or anything, and then just go in and present the file. And I took it in there. I knew the realtor, and Mrs. was sitting there. And so I opened the package, looked at it, and I said, are we waiting for Mr.? Because he was listed as well. The realtor looks at me and says, Matt, Mr.'s deceased.
Oh, no.
So you can imagine how I felt sitting at the closing table and, not knowing that he was deceased. Luckily, they did have a death certificate with them. He had been deceased for about 1.5 years, so it wasn't real fresh. I wasn't bringing up something that was right on top of the surface.
Sure.
And we were able to close. We just had to redo all of the docs, get everything kind of squared away. And it delayed closing by a couple of hours, but it could have been a lot worse. If they weren't in title as joint tenants, they would have had to go through probate, they wouldn't have been closing for months. So for us in the title thing, that's why we love the realtors to look at their title commitments and read through those. And if we show that there's two people in title and you're only dealing with one, that can be a red flag. So just make sure that everybody's aware if something's happened with that, and if it is a deceased owner, if it has to go through probate and things like that, make sure that that's been done. So you're dealing with a personal representative, so that we can make sure we have a smooth closing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Good advice. So you have another one that you sat down to the table with and then found out about additional payoffs?
Yes. It's always send out a letter to the sellers, asking them for information, because lenders nowadays, they used to have to file an assignment for who they have, who the payoff is, or who the current servicer is. They don't do that anymore. It's all handled through MERS. And we sat down at the closing. It looked like this had been released, but the seller did mention something about another payoff. Well, where's Fifth Third Bank? Or I can't remember exact bank, but where's this bank? And it's like, well, we don't have a payoff for that. So that did delay closing by a few days till we could get a payoff, get all the information. So it's critical. I mean, most of my horror stories, they start out horrible, but we have a happy ending.
That's good.
But it's just that information sheet that we send out to the sellers. It's important. That's how we can get the information, because we don't know who they make their monthly payments to. And there are really no records out there that we can search, because everything's done electronic behind the scenes with the lenders.
So I have seen in title commitments, though, where it says certain things, liens or other things can come up. So what's the difference there?
So we'll show typically on a mortgage payoff or on a mortgage who the original deed of trust was recorded. So a lot of times you'll see, like with Bay Equity or Mountain States Mortgage, they're a broker. So they start the loan, but then they sell the servicing off to somebody else. When that transfer of servicing happens, there's nothing that's of record.
Oh.
So we rely on the seller to tell us who they're making their mortgage payments to.
Gotcha.
And that's where we have to also have an authorization from them, so that the banks will talk to us, give us those payoffs.
Okay. And also, is there, I'm assuming, some sort of very secure web type situation where they can submit this information?
Personally, we use DocuSign
for
most of this information, because it's double authentication. We have to send out an email, and then we have to verbally tell them a passcode so that they can log into it. So each title company does things a little bit different, but we all, what we call that NPI, that non-public information, we treat that very thoughtfully. We don't want to just send out emails back and forth with that, or the wiring instructions, things like that. We try and be as secure with that personal information as we can be.
Yes, so make sure when you're dealing with the title company that it's them, that everything's secure, and you're double checking all of that, especially with the wire fraud.
Yeah, and luckily, knock on wood, we don't have any.
Right.
I haven't personally had any, but it's wire fraud is a huge deal. Those scammers, those fraudsters are very creative in what they're doing and how to steal that money away. So.
Yeah. So, but the title companies all around here, at least, are very proactive about that.
Yes.
All the real estate agents are going to be sending you information about that, heads up. So we try to do our very best to make sure that does not happen.
Yes.
All right. So you had another one dealing with sitting down to closing, needing money from a national bank.
Yes. So when we do closing, the buyers have to bring in good funds. So good funds, there's actually a good funds law, is a wire, a cashier's check from a bank, from a credit union, it's one of their official checks, or actually a United States Post Office money order is considered good funds. Now, the money orders are only up to $500, so sometimes that doesn't work.
That's not very helpful.
That's not very helpful. But we've had several since we are a smaller community here, we don't have some of the national banks like the Bank of Americas or the Chases. And during COVID, they loosened up their guidelines, and they would let their people initiate a wire online and over the telephone. Well, they've gone back to their pre-COVID ways. Okay. So now, and we've had people come to closing, and this one, they couldn't get their wire. They wanted to write a personal check because their bank wasn't here. So it's like, sorry, we can't accept your personal check for $100,000. Not that we don't trust you, we just don't trust anyone. So, trying to get that, they ended up having to drive to Coeur d'Alene to initiate a cashier's check, or to initiate a wire, and have that sent over to us. So, it, again, happy ending, it did close, yes, but it was delayed. They had moving truck, sitting on the street waiting to unload all their stuff. Had no place to live for a couple of days. They were planning on, moving in that afternoon. So anytime we're dealing with a bank, or your buyers are dealing with a bank that does not have a local branch here, make sure that they understand the process that bank is going to make them go through in order to initiate that wire and get a cashier's check.
So with those banks, then there's really no other way than to go to a branch in person and initiate that wire transfer.
That's their requirement, yes.
So it was lucky for them that at least there was a branch in Coeur d'Alene.
Yes.
Not all the way over in, I don't know.
Yeah.
Ohio or
exactly.
New York.
Well, like USAA is one. I think their closest branch is in Colorado Springs. So it's only a 16-17 hour drive.
Oh, that's all.
So no, it's
no big deal.
Yeah. And even with a lot of people, or some people will try and use a money market account, out of their investments. Mm-hmm. It's still not considered good funds. We still have to get that money transferred, wired from their account to us. They can't just write a check for that amount. Good funds can be a horror story for us if the communication isn't there ahead of time.
Yes, so definitely start that communication early with your title company and your real estate agent, for sure. So you had another one about having a minor on the title.
Yes, so and this happened back in Colorado. The seller was a single woman and had children. She thought in case anything happened to her, it would be a good idea to put her 16-year-old daughter in title with her. So she didn't seek the advice of an attorney or title or anything like that. And she did a quitclaim deed and deeded her daughter onto property. Well, she went to sell the property, and we did the title search and everything and found out that her daughter was a minor. A minor cannot sign legal documents. So we had to delay the closing until they opened up a court case to assign a conservator for the daughter so that they could sign the deed of the house.
How long did that take?
I believe it took about 8 weeks.
Whoa.
So closing was delayed by 8 weeks because
and at that point, really, the seller. Wait, they were the seller?
They were the seller. Yep.
So the buyer could have walked.
Buyer could have walked
if they wanted
to, but
they were in breach of contract at that point.
Exactly.
Okay.
So,
and you mentioned another one too in the class that you did for us about somebody that put their son on, and then he had some debts or something.
Yes. So it was an adult son. Probably. We'll say my age, so I'm 24. Mom quitclaimed her son on. She's elderly, failing health. In case anything happened to her, he would be entitled to the property, not have to go through probate or anything. Well, Mom's gonna sell the property, which is just fine. But since the son is now entitled, we searched his name as well. Came up with a divorce case. In that divorce case, there was a marital settlement, which was quite a large sum. And once that judgment is out there, it automatically attaches to every property that he had. Well, the judgment, the marriage, the divorce happened before he quitclaim deeded on mom's property. As soon as he came into title to that property, that judgment attaches to that real property.
So now when mom sells, she has to pay that.
That debt has to be settled. And there was a sizable amount left that was owed to the ex-wife. Ended up settling and released just mom's property from that judgment for about $15,000.
Wow.
So again, this one luckily didn't delay the closing, but it's just those extra hoops that we had to jump through that, again, somebody just doing a quitclaim deed, not seeking legal advice, and doing those things. So those are some things that, I mean, I think the original amount was about $50,000 that he owed still. So, and this was the money mom was selling the property so she could go into a retirement home. This is how she was going to pay for it. And so, so it can be very bad.
Yes, so get legal advice.
Yes.
And realtors are not your legal advice on that.
Neither are your title companies.
No.
We're always going to tell you to seek the advice of an attorney.
Sure. And I asked the question too, because in my mind I'm like, well, couldn't they just quitclaim deed it back to the mom? But you said...
No, they could, but the judgment, once he's in title, it's attached to the property, and just him coming off of title does not release that judgment from the property until there's a satisfaction that's recorded.
So good to know.
Yeah.
And another one that you said that you had a lot of dealings with, easements and access.
Easements and access, that's a big thing up here in Montana. I forgot where it was.
That's okay. It probably was in Colorado too, but I would say more so probably in
It is
Montana.
much more so.
Yeah.
In Colorado, we didn't really have that.
Really?
No, not as much. Just about everything down there is more of a subdivision. Anytime they split land in Colorado, they have to do a subdivision and a plat.
Okay.
So that takes care of kind of
Sure.
all of those things. Here, with the family transfers, and we just do everything in a meets and bounds legal description, that can create issues with access. You know, when people do those family transfers, and you know, mom and dad keep the back parcel, but they didn't give themselves access because they're doing the family transfer, and then or they on the certificate of survey they list an easement, but that's not technically a legal easement. Because there's not a grant or grantee situation, they're not giving that access to someone. The Montana Supreme Court says that does not convey legal access. So a lot of things that we see are also, there's physical access. There's a road there, but there hasn't been an easement or any access agreement that's been recorded. So these can, you know, we take exception to those kind of things. And if we've got a tight window for closing, a lot of people think, you know, oh, it's a cash deal, it's going to be super fast. We still have to do all the title research. We still have to look up at everything. And that's where, you know, we might be doing an easement at closing. There might be, you know, we've had situations where the seller is having to pay a neighbor, you know, $10,000 to grant this easement that they didn't have. So, and then also the lenders, a lot of those things want to see a road maintenance agreement.
Okay.
So you'll have some lenders that'll ask for that.
So this is something that as you go through the title commitment, if these issues come up, then as the title company you're diving deeper in, or?
Yeah, I mean, that's where we're going to, you know, that's what we're here for, is to ask the questions, and for us to explain what are your options, kind of. You know, we don't prepare the easements, we don't prepare the legal docs like that. We're going to refer you to an attorney. Again, we're not licensed attorneys, so we don't prepare those types of agreements, and we're going to refer you to the attorneys to get that done.
Okay, so then we had a water rights class and kind of ran into some things with water rights similar, where families split property, they share a well, but they don't grant the easement to access the well, that sort of thing. Do you handle any of that in title or not?
Title insurance doesn't have anything to do with water rights. Okay. We don't insure any water rights, but with that well access agreement, again, that's an easement agreement that needs to be prepared so that if you're going to do that shared well, there should be a shared well agreement in place, and then also access for whoever's property it's not on, so that if they need to maintain it or access that well, that they have that right to do so.
Okay, perfect. Yes. So, title company, attorneys, real estate agents, we all kind of work together to make sure all of this is cohesive and on the up and up before you purchase that property or sell it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yep. All right. So you said you had another one where the co-signing was not on title?
We see that, yes, but when someone is going to co-sign a loan that they're not entitled to the property, they still have to come to the closing and sign documents.
Oh, okay.
So, again, we have a borrower come in to sign, and the co-borrower didn't show up. It's like, well, they told me they didn't have to sign. So again, we have to, mom was the co-signer, she's out of state. So then we either have to have her get back here or mail out the documents. In this case, we had to do a mail out. Yeah. So again, that delays closing by about 3 days. So again, luckily the sellers didn't say they were in breach of contract because they didn't close on the date they were supposed to close. But again, it did close. We just had to mail out the documents, find a mobile notary for mom to sign, and get that taken care of that way. So anytime that, even though there's a co-signer that's not on title, they still have to sign some documents, some loan documents.
Sure. And then there's also sometimes where there's a trust or an organization or something, making sure title kind of plays into making sure the correct people are doing the signing of that as well, right?
Yep. Yeah. So that's why when there is a trust or an LLC involved, we ask for copies of those documents. We're going to ask for the trust documents so that we can see who the trustees are, what their authority is, and if they have the authority to sign and sell the property. Same with an LLC. We want to see an operating agreement, not just what the Secretary of State has. We want to see the actual operating agreement that says who runs the company, who has the authority to sign for the company. Because there's a lot of times that might be 2 or 3 different partners of the company, but only one has the authority to actually sign and sell the property. So that's why we're going to ask for those documents.
Yes. Excellent. Well, this has been incredibly enlightening. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to spend with us. If you guys have any questions or comments, leave them below. Definitely reach out. I see Matt quite often, so I'm sure he'd be happy to answer those and get back to you. Have an amazing week, and we will see you next time.